Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Jason Wright Show. Today I have Mike Stohler, who is a real estate investor that owns everything from apartment buildings to hotels. He even owns a castle in Spain that he's turned into a boutique hotel. And what we did through this conversation was just, I picked his brain. I wanted to figure out how he started the wealth generation and accumulation engine going, some of the mistakes that he's made, some of the hard lessons, but also what he looks for in an investment and how you start to build teams and structures to start to build a portfolio of real estate. A lot of times we like to think that this is rocket science when in fact it's really not. And that's one of the things I like so much about Mike. And I even mentioned it early in the conversation. He's just an average, well, he's definitely not average. He's beyond average, but just a regular guy who decided to take control of his financial fate and decided that he wanted financial freedom. He wanted to build wealth. He didn't just want to be a W-2 employee. And he's done it. This guy has done it. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you will too. Hey, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple iTunes, please consider leaving a 5-star rating. That would be so beneficial. And without any further ado, that's it. Enjoy the conversation with Mike Stohler. Thanks so much for listening. Mike, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. And you know what I want to do, where I want to start this is just after you and I talked the last time, the best part of your story, man, is that I think you, like so many other entrepreneurs, and particularly those who end up in investing in real estate, you're a normal guy. There's no that's the thing I love about real estate investment and also just small business acquisition. It's one of the things that I tell people that say a lot of them come to me and they say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start something. And the first question I start to ask them is like, well, what does that mean to you? Because there's very much a difference between an entrepreneur and a small business person. I always say a small business owner goes and buys themselves a job. It's a type of entrepreneur. But an entrepreneur, in the truest sense of the word, is someone who is taking control of their own destiny and building wealth. It might mean an exit. It might mean just accumulation, but there's a difference in trying to answer some of those questions. And in particular, real estate's one of those things that is kind of a mystery to folks. They think to themselves, well, there's more billionaires, and at least there used to be. I don't know if this is still the case. There's more billionaires in real estate than any other discipline. How does that happen? And so to get to talk to a guy like you who has executed on this is really, really fantastic, I think, and has a lot of utility value for this audience. So those are the sorts of things that we're going to kind of touch on today, but just tell us where you're entrepreneurial, because you are, and the reason why I make that distinction, Mike, is because you are an entrepreneur. You're not just someone who went out and said, well, I'm going to go buy an auto shop because I want to own my own business so I can buy myself a job. No, you, in every sense of the word, you are an entrepreneur. So where does your story toward entrepreneurship begin?
Well, that's a great question. Like you said, I'm a normal person. I consider myself a hick that done good. You know,
I can relate.
in all sense. Yeah, I'm from a small town, Indiana, and I had a couple choices. I could be a factory worker, I could be a farmer, or I could figure something else out. And back in the day when it first came out, it was the rich dad, poor dad. Someone just said, pick it up, and I was like, oh, I don't like to read, but I read it and then made the mistake, went to a bad seminar. But here's the thing is it was a mistake, but it lit the fire. It was seminar lands that's a whole other conversation. But so it was a small town. I was like, well, I'll buy a house. That can't be that hard. But this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is PG pre-Google days. I couldn't Google how to be a landlord. So we bought some homes, seller financing, and went to a university and actually bought seller financing houses from the university. And that's another topic on how you can get started um, accumulating homes. But I didn't know what I was doing, failed miserably, and gave them all back. And then just in the back of my mind, I was like, real estate, this has to be it has to be it, because I'm not smart enough to do anything else, all the other different things. But I can buy a house, I can learn how to be a landlord, and you can figure it out. And that's what I did. And fast forward, now we're international and got into hotels. And uh, if I can do it, ladies and gentlemen, anybody can do it.
All right, well, let's go back and talk a little bit about this because you touched on the seller finance. And I literally just, gosh, 2 weeks ago, I was on the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Those guys interviewed me, Russ and Joey, and
Yeah.
I told them that's exactly how I bought my first piece of real estate. How I bought my first business. And what I did, Mike, was the office building it was worth about 400 grand. They owed 56,000 on it. I pulled a couple hundred grand of equity out of that building, gave some of it back to them as a down payment to pay off their note, and then also a down payment on the business I was buying, and ended up that what I used all of their equity to buy not just the real estate asset, but to buy the whole company. When the audience hears a story like that, first of all, they think, "Oh my gosh, that's how in the world I could never do that." And even though it sounds like that first chapter of your real estate investment career may have kind of gone sideways, I got to believe, like every other good or bad experience, an education comes with it. What were some of the things you learned that you were able to do that I guarantee you, man, a lot of these audience members listening don't know? And the reason why I say that, Mike, is because I bet you've seen it too. A lot of people, they bought a house, so they think it's either, depending on the type of loan, some sort of a FHA loan where I got to put 5% down and meet all these requirements, or a typical 20% down, 30-year fixed rate mortgage at a certain rate. Buying commercial real estate, investment property, it's almost just dependent upon how creative you can get and what the seller's willing to do. There's a lot more flexibility. Talk a little bit about how you can kind of get creative. And the reason why I say this, because I was a guy when I bought that first business, and this is one of the things I talked about with Russ and Joey, is that I didn't have any money. I didn't have a high net worth. I was 28 years old. So talk a little bit about some of the creativity that you deployed to get into those first deals, even if they didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, the excuse that you don't have the money is BS, because someone, uh, do an LLC with five of your friends, combine it. There's no excuses when you say, well, I don't have the money. Um, so what I did is I found out that universities and colleges, they get bequeathed a lot of homes that they don't want. They're not landlords, but they do know how to take money on a monthly basis. So I sat down with them and said, look, here's 20 grand I can put on my credit card. I maxed out a credit card because I was poor. I think I was 27 when I started, and bought these homes. And, you can be creative that way with institutions because, they want you to take these homes. What I didn't realize is now I didn't do any inspections. I didn't know anything about real estate, inspections and appraisals, and then ended up needing a lot of expenses. So the reason why I failed is, I go in and roofs need to replace. All of a sudden I became the roofer. I became the plumber. I didn't know what the leases looked like. So it was just a disaster on that point. But now, ladies and gentlemen, there's no excuse. You can get on Jason Wright's podcast. You can listen to the episodes and learn how to be the landlord and all the different things that is required. Some of the other things that I did, when I first got into hotels, you have to be creative. And ladies and gentlemen, do not buy a hotel. It's just without an expert guiding you, it is completely 180 degrees opposite than like a multifamily. But what you can do is, if you want to get into like a larger multifamily, or you want to get into a space, find someone that's an expert. And what I did is, I knew this guy had 25 years of hotel experience. I said, look, I have the money now because someone bought my multifamily portfolio. Teach me, and you're going to run it. And I'm going to be right there with you. And in doing so, I'll give you a piece of the back end. So now he has an incentive to run my hotels properly. And I just all of a sudden got a 25-year experienced operator, and I couldn't afford to pay him on a yearly basis. I gave him a property management fee, but I gave him an incentive percentage on the back end. So that's another way to be creative. Um, Now we're finding there's a lot of foreclosures going out in the United States. I think it was Crexy just came out, or CoStar came out with a new report for foreclosures are going up. You can get inside some of those homes. I used to do flyers, taking over mortgages, mortgage assumptions. I did a lot of those in single family. So there's just so many things that you can do by, like what you said, pay off debt. It's like, how much do you owe the bank? You owe 50,000. Okay, here's 50,000. You're going to keep the mortgage in your name. I'm going to pay it for the next 2 or 3 years. And then we buy it or at the end of that. So there's just so many things we can do.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I want to talk about is setting up the LLC, because that's a thing that has worked well. Now, I've honestly, I have always, well, I take that back. I brought in a couple of partners to buy a multifamily apartment building years and years ago. That was the only time I ever did that. Most other stuff I've done solo. However, if I were ever going after like a big 250 unit apartment complex or something like that, obviously you got to set something up. I'm not going to, even if I had the money, I'm not going to assume that kind of risk with my own capital. So how have you gone about sourcing the type of people that you would want to set up an LLC with, and then get as deep as you want to on what a general partner is, who's going to manage it, how are you going to keep those bad investors out that, one of the biggest problems I think whenever you bring people to the table with capital is you're going to have some of those investors that if the initial investment, let's just call it 100,000, let's say you're trying to raise $1 million. And also, I don't want to give too much of this away. I want you to talk about it. Like, if somebody hears, oh, you're trying to buy, let's say, a $20 million multifamily unit. Oh, does that mean I go put together a group to raise $20 million? If I just stop right there, tell me, Jason, no, because I know the answer is no, Jason, you're not raising all the complete value. How would you, if I go out tomorrow, if somebody listening to this says, you know what, I just saw a portfolio of duplexes for sale. The price was $10 million. I don't have 10 million. I do have 50 to 100 grand saved up I could put into the deal. How do I go put together a group, form an LLC? What's the structure of the LLC? How do I protect myself? What do I do if one of those partners gets a divorce? What do I do if one of those partners goes broke and starts trying to beg for their capital? Just kind of walk through how you're setting up that partnership, because I think that's one of the things a lot of people miss. Again, Mike, they hear us talk about hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, hotels, multifamily, and they go, that's going to be completely unattainable for me. Putting a group together, pooling some resources, doing the pass the hat and creating something, an investment pool can be the solution. Talk a little bit about how you've gone about putting those partnerships together.
Great segment. Number one, once you do get into it, it's all about protection. And once I started getting bigger, you go into the LLCs, and I still use LLCs, but I multi-layer LLCs. And what we're doing now is what's called syndications. And you can do JVs. The first hotel was a joint venture. And a joint venture means I have this responsibility, someone else has this responsibility. We come together and form a joint, his LLC, my LLC. We combine into managers of another LLC. And then we have an operating agreement that says, I do this, you do this. At the end, this is how we split it. And and it can be anything. You can do a joint venture with a number of people. What I do is, once you get into $10 million properties, $20 million, it could be a $2 million property. The boutiques we're buying in Spain are 3 million, but there's still syndications or funds. So what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is I become a general partner, and there's one thing you don't ever want to do with this paperwork is skimp Do not go to legal, all these different websites and download forms. Um, Spend the money, make sure that you're covered. It's extremely important because if something does go sideways, you don't want another person or limited partners attorney says, oh, guess what? They forgot to put their paperwork and now they own the hotel. Um, so there's two different things. I'm the general partner and you can go as deep as you want. We have co-GPs and all these different things. And then limited partners.
And
And
Mike, real
let's
quick, just so the audience
yeah,
knows, and you correct me if I'm wrong, so the audience knows. Let's say you've got an LLC, you have members of that LLC, which there could be 2, 5, 10, it doesn't matter. One, the general partner is essentially the voice, the one. It's the person that's attached to the LLC to go to the meetings, to answer the questions. It's the reason. It's how you turn that LLC into acting like a person, even though it has multiple people involved in it. You got that right?
yeah, yeah. So the general partner is I'm in charge of the syndication. It is my LLC that's responsible for buying the properties. Even though it might be a different LLC, I'm a member of it and or manager of that. The general partner, I'm in charge of making sure the property management group does stuff, the staff does stuff. I'm basically the boss. And I have the say so on how funds are acquired and how it launched and all the marketing. I find the hotels, I do all the work. And let's say we're doing a $10 million hotel. Well, I'm going to raise 30% of that, maybe 35 if I want capital reserves. And so I then create this syndication or this fund, and then I go on podcasts like Jason's. I go on media. I do go to charity events and meetups, and it's networking. And when everyone says, Mike, what do you do? It's like, well, I own hotels. What? How do you do that? Well, let's go grab a beer and talk. So what happens is I raise 3 million of the 10 million that is, to buy the hotel. And I bring on limited partners and I do accredited investors only. That means I don't want you to bug me because you can't pay your rent and you need your money back. Um, it falls under the SEC regulations where there are performance prospectuses. It is a security. And an accredited investor means that, look, you've read through all the 50 pages that I'm going to give you, and you have a risk that you're going to spend $150,000. You may or may not get it back. That's the whole regulation that behind it. So you become a limited partner, which means the reason why it's limited is you're giving me money, 100,000, 250,000, but you have very limited rights within that syndication. You can't all of a sudden tell me how to run the business, because that's what I don't want is someone that has multifamily experience and invest with me and all of a sudden they're trying to tell me how to run a hotel. So you're very limited in what you can do. It's like buying stock. You can't all of a sudden call up Apple and tell them how to run their business. And it's the same way in syndications. And it's protected that way. And we want to make sure that there's a very known role within the limited partnership and the general partnership. But I raise the money, I do the marketing, then we close the deal, and then within that syndication and what everyone is wanting is now what do they get with their 100,000 or the 150,000 that they give me. So we do distributions, and a lot of times you do a preferred return. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is if let's say I have $100,000 to give out, and I have an 8% preferred return, 8% of that goes to the limited partners off the top before there's any other distributions. And it's based on percentages of what the percentage of, if I raise $3 million, you give me 300,000. you get 10% or you get 15%, whatever your share percentage is, and that's how you get the distributions. What else can I say about them? And then they're usually 5 years, 7 years. It depends. Multifamily is not as long as a hold than like hotels, because hotels are a business. So it takes a long time, a lot longer time to, and you're dealing with franchises. It's a whole other ballgame. So it's usually a longer hold.
Now, whenever you're doing, you say that how long you're holding, do you do a typical like PE 5 year hold? And are you doing some things where you go into it knowing that you're going to do kind of a cash out refi to, get people their money back and walk through some of those scenarios? Because I think that's one of the things that probably a lot of people hear about all the time. Like, I had this guy he was pitching me a deal at the country club, and he said, this is how much it's going to cost you to get in. And then after 5 years, we're going to refinance the thing. You're going to get all your money back, but you're still going to have a carried interest. And tell the audience, what the hell does that mean? What was this guy trying to tell me?
Yeah. So yeah, you can have one exit strategy. You can have three exit strategies. It depends on um, whether it's a box franchise. And most of the time in the hotel business, we don't do a refi because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't go up in value that much. So, but ladies and gentlemen, what it is let's say I can sell in 5 years if we hit our IRR, our internal rate of return, and that means everyone's happy. And someone comes up and says, in 5 years, Mike, I'm going to give you 15 million for that $10 million hotel. I'm going to say yes. And I have that option. So even though I might say it's a 7 year hold, I have the option to sell it at 5 years if the dream scenario happens and someone wants to buy it. I can also hold it for 10 years. So you give yourself some leeway for the limited partners so that they know that there's, in case COVID happens, the hotels in COVID, it's those 7 year holds turn into 10 year holds because we had to recoup and rebuild. But you built that scenario in the paperwork. With our boutiques, because people don't want to sell them, all of a sudden, I created this lifestyle investment where people, for the first time in my career, saying, I don't want you to ever sell this. I want to go sip wine in my castle in Spain, and you're not going to sell it. So I'm like going, okay, well, I'm going to have to do something else here. So you can do a lot of different exit strategies. And then you can also tier the limited partner. If you give me 100,000, you get this. If you give me 250,000, you get this. So you have different tiers within the limited partnership. But with the boutiques, we have the three exit strategies. So in year three, if we hit the IRR, we can refinance them. So those are capable because we're buying cash for those. And then we're going to refinance in year three. And then you have an option. I can give you your money back. The investors that want to stay can actually buy your shares if you want to leave. So it increases their percentage of ownership. Then we can refinance, buy another hotel, and now we have two hotels. And you've still only given me the initial 150,000. So now you have more shares, more income coming in, and then we do that in another 3 years, and then another 3 years. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how you can see, without really getting a lot more money, how you can all of a sudden own 5 properties because you're just right. And the distributions are, a lot of the investors say, I don't need cash. That's
Right.
one thing. That's why I'm giving you money in real estate. Keep churning my distributions, keep them going, keep it working. So and then the last thing is those people that want to keep it for 10, 20 years, we just keep it rolling. but we do limited partner. Like if you give me $250,000, you get 2 weeks stay at the castle for 4 people. And so you can play around. It's a lot of people think it's very strict on how to do syndications and funds. You can put anything in it that you want. You can detail it. It's unlimited.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think that, again, like whether you're buying a business, real estate, or whatever, the fun part about these deals is that it's all about how creative you can get and can you sell the deal to whomever you're either sourcing capital from or whatever the case may be. Now, what I want to ask you, so you hear a lot about short-term rentals, and I guess just in general, since we're talking about hotels, boutique hotels, multifamily, what's your general take on short-term rentals? Good investment, bad investment, and if, or can be, depends. And if so, what's kind of the perfect scenario? Like, and then I want you to take that, Mike, from like answering that question, just because I've had a lot of people ask me about short-term rentals. But then I want you to say, all right, what's your avatar target? What do you love to look at right now? Here's all the dominoes. If they're all lined up, boom, I know I can sell that deal all day long. I'm going to get in. I'm going to sponsor it. I'll be the general partner, and I can get people to go. What does that look like? But first of all, short-term rentals, what's your take?
It's That's what I'm seeing. I live in one of my houses is in Scottsdale, Arizona. Huge area for short-term rentals, Airbnbs. We're seeing a lot of municipalities, cities starting to crack down and zone short-term rentals.
Yep.
So, ladies and gentlemen, don't just buy a house and say, I'm going to Airbnb it. Look at the local code and then look at what's on the docket, later on in the year or in a couple of years, because then it may be on the dock that they're regulating it, even though it may not be now. I see a lot of short-term rental people turning their homes into midterm rentals because the oversupply of short-term rentals. So midterm rentals, ladies and gentlemen, is like a 31 day to 11 month. You're not locking into a 12 month, but you're getting the snowbirds, you're getting maybe some grad students, some expats. We have one where someone's doing a medical residency and it's a short-term rental. So I like short-term rentals. I own short-term rentals more. The place that we're in now. This is our kind of a mountain house because I love making money and I can't stand having assets that don't make me money. This is a short-term rental when we're not using it, but it's more the luxury. So people are paying, $3,000 a week, and so it's a higher end. So there's less competition for it, and the neighborhood allows it. So I like short-term rentals, but do your research. It's no longer that guaranteed. I'm just going to make a lot of money renting this thing out. There's a lot of expenses now. Do your due diligence with the regulations. What's the neighborhood? If it does have an HOA and do they allow it? There's a lot of things now that you have to really pay attention. You can still make money short-term rentals. It's just saturated.
All right, so now let's look at your avatar. What's like kind of the perfect deal? And I'm really curious about the boutique environment because I'm out in East Texas. And what's happening right out here, Mike, is a lot of my hometown is one of the perfect examples. So I'm from Sulphur Springs, Texas, population around 15,000. It's perfectly situated an hour outside of the Dallas Metroplex. And if you were to walk to downtown in downtown Sulphur Springs on the square, you would think you're in a movie set. You would think that you are in a Norman Rockwell painting, man. I mean, it is gorgeous. And they've actually taken some of the old buildings that were just nothing when I was growing up and made them look like little San Francisco type flats. I mean, it's really remarkable what they've done. And so I look at, and it's happening all over East Texas, these little bitty hamlets all over. And I look at that, and whenever you talk about a boutique hotel, I don't know that and first of all, let's define that. How many rooms does one of your typical boutique hotels have?
less than 15. Well, I
Okay.
should say less than 20. Most of them are they're it's called a micro boutique. You can have 50 rooms and it
Okay.
could be considered a boutique.
Yeah.
But mine are very small.
Okay, I like that. So I'm looking at all of these pop up everywhere to where somewhat where I could probably get 20 people on a pretty regular basis coming from Dallas or wherever they just want to have a small town feel. There's good restaurants and everything. Um, how do I make those economics work? And are you buying existing infrastructure and refurbing it? Or are you kind of taking a theme like a, I don't know, maybe a Charleston looking vibe and building it into like your small town Indiana, man. So you're going to French Lick and you're building this really cool building
Yep,
that looks like it's been there 100 years, but has all the
that's
modern
right.
amenities. Kind of what's your strategy on whenever you go into one of your boutique
Mhm.
hotels?
Yeah, great question. And everything depends, right? It depends on the market, depends on, it's like, you know what, I can turn this old factory or this old mill or what's and turn it into a very cool boutique, and so you see those opportunities. Um, I love the small downtown mixed use, like what you're saying with your small town. You can go in and put the little coffee shop or the little cafe on the bottom, and you have maybe, five or six or 10 small boutique hotel. And you kind of do this theme along, we're really big on themes, trying to keep it within the local. There's a reason why you're not seeing it a Hilton or a Marriott in these type of towns. There's a new thing that's really maybe 2 years old that we're seeing in the hotel industry. And people want to experience the lifestyle or the culture of where they're at
Hmm.
more than getting the Marriott or the Hilton rewards points. They want cooking classes. They want some type of a wine tasting. They want a lifestyle event with these boutiques. So we go in and say, what is around the area? What can we get that would attract these people? And especially in the younger adults, um, they want experiences now. Life's too hectic, for them. So they want to unwind. They want mountain biking tours. They want all these different things. So we look at that. Like in Spain, uh, one we're getting ready to purchase. It was built in 1310. This building, um, it's over 1,000 years old. It has 13 rooms. It sits in a national park, Molsony National Park. It's the only building 360. No, no. There's a cathedral that was built around the same time. It sits on another hillside, but that's the only building 360-degree views. Um, and we look at this one hasn't been opened since 2019. So a lot of the boutiques that we're buying haven't been opened since COVID. And you can find what I look for is aging owners that just don't have the energy to um, keep them running, or it's like after COVID, it kind of wiped them out, and now they're just maybe doing events. So we go in and buy those, and we can get some seller financing on those too, because they just want out. Those are the opportunities that you have to look for, ladies and gentlemen. Is how can you help the owner get out of the situation, but you're also helping yourself and your investors. So kind of keep your eyes open and look for boutiques that maybe have aging or multifamily that have aging owners. Um, but yeah, we go in and for the ones in Spain, they haven't been opened. Those are the ones that we get good deals on, and then we just kind of do what's necessary. Maybe 100,000 euro refurb. A lot of it's landscaping, freshening up the rooms, things like that. But I like those because you just get better deals. Instead of buying here's a 4 or 5 star boutique that's already in operation, you're going to pay a premium for it, but you get immediate cash flow.
How long have you been in Spain? How long have you been investing overseas?
3 years.
And what were some of the biggest? First of all, how in the hell did you do that? How did you just all of a sudden, yeah, let's go,
Yeah.
let's go take our act to Spain. How did that happen? And then what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because obviously that's a romantic vision, is to go and buy a place in some beautiful little medieval village or something. But then reality sets in. How'd you pull that off, mate?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, remember that guy that was my first hotel, the operator that I knew, 25 years experience, and we've been partners. A while back, he bought an apartment in Spain, and he kept bugging me. He's like, "You need to see this. You need to go." And I'm like, "Yeah, social, but I'm, all the politics, and I'm not going into Spain." And he was like, "Get your ass over here." And I was like, "I'll take a vacation to Spain. That's fine." So he started showing me, rented a car, went up into the Costa Brava region, which is northeast of Barcelona. That's where we concentrate. And he showed me this castle. It's 19 rooms. He goes, I'm like, "Why are you showing me this?" Yeah, it's cool. We get to tour it. And he goes, "No, it's a boutique hotel." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "How much you think it is?" I'm like, "I don't know, if it was in Sedona, Arizona, I don't know, 15 million. He goes, 2.2, sits on 43 acres, gets 80,000 euros per wedding. And that's when this light bulb, that light bulb, everything I just started spinning. And he showed me another one in a medieval village. It was built in 1610 and beautiful, 10 rooms, 136 acres, 1.7 million. And then I was like, "Okay, why am I investing in the United States anymore?" And I was like, "Okay, what do the P&Ls look like?" And, the one that we're looking at now, gross is 1.2 million. We have to work some of the things out because in Spain they put the dog food. They took the kids' everything's on the P&Ls.
Of course.
It's crazy, and plus you have to translate it from Spanish to. But um, it makes about 600,000, and we're buying for 2.4 million.
Okay. Wow. So less than three times, less than a 3x
Mhm.
acquisition. Okay.
And it was built in 1312, I think, though.
Oh
And
gosh.
it's a Michelin star restaurant.
Wow.
Comes in it, and it sits on its own mountaintop, hillside. It's crazy. So that's why we're in Spain. But getting it, okay, how do we get there? It's a lot of freaking paperwork. Ladies and gentlemen, my God, it's you need, of course, the tax code. And I can go in a lot of detail. Everyone needs a NIA number. Um, there's a reason why there's not a lot of entrepreneurs in Spain. It's just extremely expensive. Um, a notary signature is $800. Um, I can go to the UPS store and get it for what, $10. Um, to set up an SPV or an SL, which is their version of an LLC, it costs around 12 to 15,000 euros. And you can go on your state board, get an LLC for $80, right? I mean, you can register for $80, get your EIN. Over in Spain, it's tens of thousands of dollars because it's just attorneys and all the paperwork, um, and then you have to get into the regulations of each municipality. So it's kind of like within Spain, you have Catalonia in Spain. Catalonia is and they don't like each other. Um, but Catalonia is more of the capitalistic side of Spain. But then each municipality is kind of like its own state where they all have the regulations, and they have the mayor, and you have to take them out to dinner, and you have to figure out what charity they need to fund, and it's just all this paperwork. But once you do it the first time, then you're like, "Okay, I have my attorneys now. I have this guy," and so it's like anything. It's a big pain, a lot of expense when you first set it up, but now we're rolling.
And do you have to worry, like one of the things you mentioned earlier is like, on the short term rentals, you have to worry about HOAs and city ordinances and the things they're looking at. The thing that's always frightened me about overseas investment in business or real estate is like, well, I mean, now you're fighting potentially the government coming along and completely changing things up. And, I mean,
Yeah.
especially in a very socialistic area where they can say, you know what, for the greater good, Mike, we're going to go ahead and take your hotel and use it for whatever. Are you pretty protected against that? I mean, is the rule of law strong enough and contract law strong enough to protect you in those instances?
It is with hotels and businesses and tourism and things like that. They're what they're doing in Spain is talk about short-term rentals. They've actually stopped issuing. You cannot get an Airbnb. You cannot get the license because they think that it's stupid. They think that's the reason why housing is not affordable anymore. And you're like, okay, the Airbnbs is that's the reason why the percentage increase of the housing is so high.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
each municipality,
Mike. The reason that the cost of living in New York is so high is because Ken Griffin bought a 300 or however much $1 million
yeah,
penthouse. And, if he hadn't done that, then affordable housing would be alive and well in Manhattan. So these things happen.
yeah,
It's just economics
I
101.
know
Yeah,
because the regular Joe lunch pail Joe guy, he should have had the opportunity to buy that $30
right,
million
right,
penthouse.
right, right.
You know, and the rent controls.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so they have that stuff, but there's always loopholes. But each municipality, each little town and village has their own laws. So it's kind of like state laws. And those little villages absolutely love the boutiques because that brings revenue into those towns. So it's kind of like the separation of state and the federal government. They have that over there.
Hmm.
So there's not too much that the federal government can do in Spain. They can tax, you know, and things like that. I think the biggest thing would be hey, guess what? We're going to tax you more. But that'd be the same thing that, look what Mondami's doing in New York. Hey, we're going to tax you more. So it's everywhere, right?
Yep.
It's so I just choose to do business in certain states and not in certain states. And we're taking the jump in Spain. Here's the thing: it's only a couple million, and we're making 25% of that per year. Um, and they want these historic places, these castles, these estates, these macias, um, well kept.
Yep.
So that's another thing that we have going for us is that they want us to do these boutiques.
Yeah, I had that conversation. I was on city council here in Tyler years ago, and because I was in the real estate business at the time, one of my opponents was very anti-development, and one of the arguments they made was all of these beautiful old homes have been converted into accounting, insurance, law offices in this particular street, and I guess it was right after she had lost the election to me. She came into my office with a little entourage talking about some other anti-development project she was on, and she brought this particular street up, and I said, yes, isn't it wonderful that those businesses have bought those properties and actually maintained them far better than just allowing them to sit there and hoping that someone could come pay $1 million for a single family residence on one of the busiest streets in Tyler, Texas. That would make no sense. It's good to hear that there are places like that understand yeah, the those darned old evil capitalists, they seem to really understand highest and best use when it comes to real estate, and you can work together to maintain the integrity of the property. That's what's so beautiful about this. So that's really cool. And I'm also interested, I may have to follow up with you. So I just paid for my first wedding. My oldest daughter got married 1 month ago yesterday.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I know what a wedding costs out here. If you're telling me that I could go do an 80 It's that 80,000 euro wedding in Spain at a castle. Brother, we might need to talk. That sounds like a bargain
Yeah.
compared to what I dealt with
You
here in good
rent,
old East
you
Texas.
rent out the entire, you rent out the entire castle, the entire estate. Um, it's, yeah, beautiful.
So tell me about the staffing. That's another thing that's always scared me about hotels, boutique or otherwise. And whenever I'm looking at a real estate investment, I'm thinking of overhead and I'm thinking just the operating expenses and all that. What does that look like? Let's just keep it on your European example over in Spain. What is kind of how do you staff these things?
Yeah, great question. So with the boutiques, you have we like to get a husband and wife caretaker
Yep.
team. Um, she'll run the inside and he runs the outside of it.
Which is old
Uh,
school and is probably harder to find here in the States, I would think.
Harder to find there, but over in Europe, it's that's how
Yep.
they do it.
Yep.
They love to do that. We have a little apartment or a room for them. They stay there and they run it. And some of these people have been doing that same thing for 20, 25 years. They started when they're in their 20s. Now they're in their late 40s and they are caretakers. So that caretaker word is a lot more European than here in the States. Um, with the 13 room, I think we have three other people. We'll have a front desk, a housekeeper, and they're all cross trained. So they're running rooms. And if we have any events, then we hire from the local village, and there's people that want to work on a part-time basis. They like cash and euros, and we do that. And then the restaurants we like to lease out. I don't like to be in the F&B business, so we'll lease it out to a well-known chef, and then they handle their payroll. They handle that business, and they just lease the space from us. It's a lot simpler. So in a 13 room, we one, two, three, four, maybe five people, and we're paying the caretakers together about 40,000 euros a year total,
Wow.
and that is a very, very good living. Because now they don't have room rate. Because we give them the room, but 35,000. I have a buddy who makes 35,000 a year. He lives in Barcelona. He can't tell his friends he makes 35,000 a year. It's such a good. I mean, he's living large.
Really?
So the cost of living is a lot less over there. We're paying housekeepers 750 euro, 7 euros, 750 euro an hour. It's just it's inexpensive, and because there's just so much subsidized over there, um, cost of living is just it's unbelievable. Interest rates, ladies and gentlemen. I just bought a house over there last year, 2.55%.
Really?
Do you believe that?
Whoa.
And they apologized to me that it was that high.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So,
Yeah, so that's why we're doing business. You don't want to grow up in that socialistic experiment,
yeah.
but you want to take advantage of it. So that's
Well, it's exactly what Scott Galloway says is that, and I don't agree with Scott on everything he says, but one of the things he did say that makes a lot of sense to me is you make your money in the United States and you spend it in Europe. And that's just, to me, it's kind of the way it is. All right, now before I let you go, this has been fun, but I don't know if you've seen this Instagram. It's called School of Hard Knocks. This guy, he goes around, he just kind of ambushes, guys getting out of their McLarens or whatever. So this is the first time I've ever done this, Mike, but I want to do this because I think that you're kind of the guy that he usually finds, getting out of a cool car somewhere and asking how you did it. And we've talked about some of that, but I won't ask specific numbers or anything like that just because I think that's kind of in bad taste. Now, he does it well, but I'll ask you the same thing. I have one of my buddies who's an actor out in LA. I asked him the question, when did you realize you were an actor, a paid actor, and that's how you could make a living? You didn't have to do any side hustles anymore. You were making enough money. And he said it was after he did this, I think it was a Dr. Scholl's commercial, and he got his first residual, and he's like, holy crap, I'm rich. So, how old were you when you realized, okay, I've attained, I've either attained or I've started to attain enough wealth that this is real. I'm kind of out of the matrix. I'm building my wealth. How old were you when that started really happening?
I would say around 40.
So 27, you get started,
Mhm.
40, all that education. So it doesn't happen quick, but to somebody right now that has never tried it, 28, 30, 40, is it ever too late? What are some of the things that they could do to start to accumulate wealth, start to invest in real estate, start to understand the business, minimize risk? What would you say to people that are thinking about doing this?
Well, one of the reasons why it took me longer is because I didn't have anyone to go to. I didn't have business mentors. I didn't have webcasts, YouTube channels. So it's learning, sacrificing, moving into the in-laws house because you lost everything. There was a lot of that stuff. And it wasn't until, and ladies and gentlemen, what did I do to learn? I actually went to work for a property management company. So there's no excuse. Okay. If you want this bad enough, I was like, you know what? I need to learn how to do this. So I went to work for a property management group. I took all their forms. I was like, oh, I finally have lease forms and found out how to do it. So it took me a while. And then got scared, and I was like, do I do it? How do I do it? It ruined our lives the first time. So there's that slow burn. But here's the thing is networking. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to find your why. Um, Money will come if you do it correctly. But what is your why? This is people, and don't pay attention to these YouTube kids, I'm worth millions of dollars, and I'm 22 and I did it in 1 year. And I'm like, I can buy $1 million house and be a millionaire, right? I mean,
Right,
on paper, I'm a
right.
million. So, but you're worth 20,000 a year. That's how much you bring home. Don't pay attention to those. It's a lifestyle. Being an entrepreneur is tough. There's some people are just W-2 people, and they know that they don't have the stomach for what we do in our 20, 30, 40-year careers as an entrepreneur. But get mentors, listen to podcasts like Jason's, and take notes. Go to there are some good seminars out there, but read books, read. There's a lot of great books out there. Um, and pay attention, and then get do a JV with someone. Like, don't just buy stuff. Find someone like myself or Jason, say, hey, can we partner and we do this? And then you learn that way. And maybe you don't be the general partner first. You become a joint venture or limited partner, and then learn from the general partner. It's all about learning. Um, and when I finally got to the point where it's like, what, I can work from anywhere in the world. Um, that to me was the true wealth. Is I could be up here at this cabin, I can be in Spain, I can be on a cruise, doesn't matter, and I can run my business.
I love
That's
it.
true wealth for me.
Oh, 100%. Freedom is wealth. I could not agree more. And just what does your infrastructure look like at this point, Mike? I mean, first of all, kind of how many properties do you have? And you can measure it in units or overall properties. What does your portfolio look like? And then what's your kind of your team? What does that look like? What's your head count of people that are either W-2 or otherwise that you've got supporting your infrastructure now?
Boy, what, 20, counting people, 25 employees, maybe 30, and or 50, uh, several hundred doors.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, it's I don't even know now. And we're always selling, we're always buying. We have a a Wyndham hotel that we're trying to sell now. Um, I have some people trying to talk me into developing some hotels here in Scottsdale, building a high-end Hilton that'll be 120 keys. Uh, but it's even though I want that fancy rooftop bar at the hotel, you have to look at debt service coverage ratios,
Yeah.
DSCR,
Yeah. Yeah.
and whether or not it makes sense in today's market to actually buy or build stuff. Um, it's not 2019 anymore.
Well, and before I let you go, I want to offer an opportunity for a call to action. How can this audience stay in touch with you, learn more from you, possibly come alongside you in a deal? How do you leverage this platform, man? It's yours.
I'm very, very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Always find me on LinkedIn and let me know that you heard about me on Jason's show, and I'd love to answer any questions. Website is gatewaype.com. It's Gateway Private Equity Group, gatewaype.com, and you can look at our Spain projects and some of the things that we're doing. And we have a nice fancy brochure that you can click on that shows what the castles and estates look like and all that stuff.
Well, terrific. Well, Mike, this has been fun, man. I told you this would just be a conversation, me kind of picking your brain, and I hope you'll come back. And I would love to visit with you further about this deal that I'm seriously trying to figure out. Do I want to build something back home in Sulphur Springs that makes sense and kind of like this, almost like an inn type situation? That would be kind of like something. I've also got a tract of land that I bought to build a farmhouse that's very perfectly located to do either a wedding venue or kind of like a retreat type deal. I don't know, maybe you're doing one of these. One of the things that's kind of caught my attention because one of the companies I'm co-founder of is Authentic Health Partners. We manufacture nutraceuticals with some of my physician business partners. And I love these health retreats that are popping up kind of all over the globe. I just looked in the Rate magazine a couple issues back, and they've got some of them profiled. Have you looked at any of those, or you think you're going to do anything like that?
Yeah, in the line of so in Europe, in Spain, what's really really big is they call them the shaman retreats,
Yep. Yep.
and you get the maybe the yogis and or the group of I think it was like 12 people, and they like granola and grass, for a week and did their whatever. I don't care as long as they pay.
Right.
But that is really big, and you have these traveling wellness people that are different things within the healthcare industry or the shaman and just the wellness retreats in general. It's really really big. There are people that we're looking at. You have these CEOs and their younger wives, and and the guys sitting back at the bar. They're off doing their these retreats, and they're paying a lot of money. And what we found out is the companies now are actually paying for their CEOs to go to these wellness retreats.
Yep.
So you can get big bucks for them, and as part of their wellness package to keep the CEOs healthy. So if you can dig into and get into that type of a program, get on their radar, you can. It's very very big.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's what I originally thought of. If Jimlin and I didn't build this as like a little family type retreat, as to do something where I would bring in a chef and everything be clean, have cold plunge, red light, all of it, to where they would come. And also just a place where, and I would do mine strictly men, just because it would and the reason why is because I would want it to be like 5 or 6 senior level executives that could come in and just, kind of like, okay, there's no cell phones, there's no social media here. Let's talk. Let's get, that's kind of that iron sharpening iron type retreat is something that I've got in the back of my mind. So I may want to pick your brain a little further about this, man, because it's obviously, I'm to your point. I want to, I some of the greatest things that I've learned in life have come by doing the absolute wrong thing. You learn the hard way, but it's education. But I'm at that point now at 51 that I want to sidestep the landmines as much as possible. The hard lessons I try to minimize as best I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell myself every day, quit doing stupid stuff, Mike.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I'm kind of like Dwight Schrute on The Office. I think what an idiot would do, and I don't do that thing.
That's right.
Well, Mike, this has been a
That's right.
blast, brother. Man, you're welcome back anytime. And I'm serious. I might need to plan a trip to the castle, and I'm going to be with I'm going to look on the website and check it out. My daughter, who will probably be getting married next, well, she's the only other daughter I have, and I think that it'll probably happen within about a year or so. She's going to be actually home for Memorial Day weekend from California, and so we'll scope it out and see if and she's the one that I could see, like Rylan, her sister, wanted the big Southern blowout wedding, which she got. It was gorgeous. Her sister is much more artsy and more kind of boutique, and that's so I feel like that might be something we look at. So it'd be cool to have a connection in that space.
There you go. Perfect.
All right, brother. Mike, thanks so much, man. It's been great having you.
All right. Take care, Jason. See you.
Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian Letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.
This episode of The Jason Wright Show is sponsored by Authentic Health. At Authentic Health, we believe real health starts at the cellular level. In today's world, stress, processed foods, environmental toxins, and poor sleep are working against your body every single day. If you want to take control of your health and build a stronger foundation, visit shopauthentichealth.com and use promo code JASON to get 10% off your first order. That's promo code JASON for 10% off at Authentic Health.